Unconscious ideas are at the core of psychological conflicts. I can give you an example. Let's do a psychosomatic one. This sort of thing is extremely complicated. So I had a client once who, she had a real fun time. I'll change the story a little bit. She was at a job that she had been training at for a long period of time, and she thought she was doing pretty well, but they fired her, and then they packed her up and put her on her bicycle to go home the same day, and then on the way home, she drove her bicycle down a ravine and crashed into a tree. So that's real fun. That's a 1-2 punch, right? So first of all, your job disappears, and then as you're just barely not recovering from that, then bang, you get hurt. And she was quite hurt as a consequence of the accident. So she had come to see me for, looked like post-traumatic stress disorder, but there was a bit of underlying thought disorder that was sort of associated with it. But to make a long story short, one of the things that she did when she came to see me was she was always like this. And I found this very bothersome after a while because of I think it was mirroring. So she'd come in here like this, and that would make me uncomfortable. And one day, I had mentioned this to her, and she said she thought she had hurt her arm, and maybe she had. And so I started getting her to move her arm a little bit, so she'd move it like this, and then she'd move it like this, and then she'd move it like this. And she was getting so she could move it pretty well. And then the next time she came in, she was still like this. And I got this weird impulse, and I said, well, come over and just stand. I'd seen her for like years by this point. I said, just stand by my desk. And so she stood like this, and I sort of pounded my fist down her spine. And she cried for like 45 minutes. So that was pretty interesting. I mean, it was light pounding, eh? And then her shoulder was looser and she could move her arm more. And so then I kind of investigated that. And she said, well, she was afraid to move her arm because she might damage it more. And so then I looked into that. And then she told me a story about how one time when she was 5 years old, she'd got accidentally into a wagon and gone down a hill and cracked up at the bottom, and then they put her in the hospital, and then her parents weren't allowed to see her for like a month and a half, which is what hospitals used to do, because they were sadistic and stupid. And so that left her with a permanent distrust of institutions, which was sort of associated with the kind of the paranoid edge of her post-traumatic stress disorder, but also accounted for why she didn't want to move her arm, because she thought if she moved it, then that might hurt her more, and then she'd end up in the hospital. And so that's a good example of how unconscious memories and conflicts, part of the big conflict there for her was she had a real problem with institutions, and a lot of that was politicized. There was something wrong with all institutions, which is true, but irrelevant in most cases, because you still have to adapt to the damn things. But it had really hurt her adaptation because she couldn't trust institutions, and then if she ever got hurt physically, she couldn't move herself because she was afraid she'd re-damage the body part and then she'd end up in an institution. So that's a good example.